Our top focus on WION this hour. Former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's resignation as a Member of Parliament came in as a shock. But trouble continues to mount for UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Yet another Tory MP has resigned from Parliament. MP for Selby and Ainsty, Nigel Adams, took to Twitter to announce his departure. He tweeted, and I'm quoting here, "I've today informed the Chief Whip that I will be standing down as a Member of Parliament with immediate effect. It has been an honour to represent the area where I was raised, educated, and I want to thank my constituents for their wonderful support since 2010. Besides Johnson, his loyalist Nadine Dorries had also quit as an MP on Friday, which means that the current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, whom Johnson party partly blames for his downfall, faces at least 3 daunting election tests in the form of by-elections to these 3 vacated seats. A new poll has found that the Labour Party has a clear lead over the Tories in more than 100 battleground seats that could decide the next election. In a lengthy resignation statement, Johnson took on the Rishi Sunak government, blaming the current Prime Minister for his rising taxes, not being conservative enough and failing to make the most of Brexit. Experts believe that there could be as many as 50 Tory MPs who are in the Johnson camp, which could be bad news for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Sunak has been trying to steady the ship since becoming the Prime Minister in October. That is after the turbulent tenure of his former boss and the short-lived premiership of Liz Truss. And now, these Tory resignations come as a coordinated attack on the Prime Minister, who they believe failed to back Johnson on the Partygate issue as well as the honours list. For more on this, we are now being joined by Dr. Nigel Fletcher, a renowned political analyst and commentator. He's joining us live on the broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us on WION, Mr. Adams.
Good morning. It's
Right.
Dr. Fletcher, actually. That's the other Nigel.
Absolutely, Nigel. Nigel Adams is the 3rd Tory MP to quit in the last 24 hours. What's next for the UK politics and the Conservatives?
Well, yes, we've had a period of comparative calm, I think, in British politics recently. I think on Friday night, or sort of Friday afternoon, certainly, when we first started hearing the beginnings of this latest drama, things started to look a bit like they have done in the past few years with the kind of media circus around Boris Johnson. And it's difficult to know really what it means for the future, but I think that there have been a number of different interpretations of the reasons for Boris Johnson quitting. I think on the face of it, it seems quite clear that he's concluded that he was on his way to being kicked out of Parliament anyway. His very long resignation letter set out his grievances against the procedure that's being followed by the Privileges Committee. There are, of course, many different stages they would have to go through before he faced the danger of losing his seat. But he seemed to believe that that was what was about to happen, because he's been given an advance copy of their report, which is fairly damning. It finds him guilty of having misled Parliament. It was going to recommend a form of sanction that would leave him open to a recall petition. That would open the possibility then of a by-election in his constituency, which, looking at the polls, he was likely to lose. So I think that this is a preemptive resignation to serve his purposes in order to cut that off. But also we've seen all of these other events happening around, with the controversy over his resignation honours list. Nadine Dorries quit in sort of protest at the fact that she wasn't on that. And Nigel Adams, I think, is also a very close Boris Johnson colleague, but he'd announced as well that he was going to be standing down at the next election. So once again, he has sort of resigned in order to cause trouble for the Conservative Party and Rishi Sunak. So I think the reasons behind these resignations are perhaps easier to see as part of a sort of more personal infighting within the Conservative Party. The effect of them, I think, is more difficult to know.
Right, Nigel, you lamented the reasons for these resignations. Let's talk about the kind of challenges that Sunak will now face as the pro-Johnson MPs are now on a resignation spree.
Well, the first challenge that he's got, of course, is these 3 by-elections. And as we've seen in recent by-elections, that's going to be very difficult for the Conservatives. The Uxbridge seat, the Labour Party has been campaigning for quite a long time. They've selected a candidate. They were preparing for the possibility that Boris Johnson might have faced a recall petition and by-election, but also they were gearing up, frankly, to try and unseat him at the next general election anyway. So that one is well advanced. That one, I think, is going to be very tricky. Nadine Dorries' seat in Mid-Bedfordshire, I think, is probably better for the Conservatives, but we've seen perhaps the Liberal Democrats in the past have had some spectacular wins of by-elections facing huge Conservative majorities. They're looking at that one. And so there are a number of challenges. Nigel Adams' seat has just selected its Conservative candidate, so I think that person is going to be propelled very quickly into a by-election, and that's going to be the focus. I think Rishi Sunak will probably want to get the pain out of the way, if it's going to be pain, as quickly as possible. So I'm hearing reports that the writs for those by-elections will be moved fairly swiftly, and I think they're going to try and have those perhaps before the summer, and possibly on the same day, so that the campaigns are not spread out. That way, I think they can perhaps minimise the damage that's caused for this, assuming, of course, that no other MPs follow suit and resign. But we haven't seen any immediate signs that that's going to happen.
Right, Nigel. Thank you so much for joining us on WION and sharing your insights with us. We'll, of course, be tracking the story very closely here. Thanks very much.